welcome back again to Unfiltered with Sam. Our guest today is Dr. Athanasios Drougos. Dr. Drougos is a senior defense and counterterrorism analyst based in Attiki in Greece. He specializes in global security, terrorism, asymmetric threats, and NATO affairs, and serves as a lecturer at various military and defense colleges, including NATO institutions. Dr. Drougos is a frequent guest on Greek channels, both mainstream media and alternate media alike, sharing insights on geopolitical analysis, defense, diplomacy, and intelligence. Dr. Drougos, welcome to Unfiltered with Sam.
Susie from Athens, good evening. Thank you very much for the kind invitation. I'm glad to answer your questions. Please go ahead.
I'll do that right away, sir. So let's dive right into the matters at hand. My first question is that the Russians are working to withdraw the forces and the weapons from Syria, transferring them to Libya. So is Libya the next big front where the war will be fought? And are we seeing the same actors involved there also?
Well, first of all, I would say that, as you know, probably know, that the Russian bases in Syria have a long history, going back to 1971, and the decision by the father of Assad, Hafez al-Assad, to come much closer to the Russian, that time Soviet position, thus offering, at least at the beginning, the base for maritime operations in Thanasis, which of course hosts since then various kind of Soviet and Russian ships. During the war in 2015-2016, the Russian Federation increased the military presence in Syria by expanding the activities and in the air areas. For instance, by sending bombers, by sending fighter bombs, other kind of aircrafts, especially transportation aircrafts and so on. So during the Bashar al-Assad years, the two bases offered a lot of specific, let's say, issues available to the Russian Federation in order to increase the presence in Middle East, and also in order to handle domestic issues like guerrilla warfare, taking mostly places in the northern part and northeastern part of the Syrian territory. During the last events, the Russians now are in a very difficult position, Susie, because it's not very sure if they will manage to increase the participation in Syrian affairs. I don't see that possible because they have lost a lot of influence during the last weeks. And as far as I know, and from my materials and information, I can tell you that the Russians are transferring step by step people, military people, also maybe members of the Wagner mercenary group. They are transferring them to gather weapons to the areas of eastern Libya, to what I call Haftarstan. As you know, the warlord Haftar is the main person in the eastern part of Libya. So as far as I know, and from other informations coming from NATO and also from American or other sources and European sources, I can tell you, Susie, that it's difficult to bring the Russians completely in control in eastern Libya, because there are no easy, facilities, maritime facilities there, as the case of Tarsus in Syria. But in order to manage some things, as long as we have serious problems in Syria and the guerrillas control now the situation in Damascus and also in the big cities like Homs, Hama, Halep, and so on, I think that at the end of the day, the Russians, step by step, not immediately, not in the next 2-3 days, probably they negotiate if they could find a solution with the new military and political authorities in Damascus, and if they can stay there. But frankly speaking, and from quite deep sources I have information material, I can tell you, Susie, that the Russians, at the end of the day, they will leave, but it will take some time, especially concerning the naval base. As you know, a number of ships now are in the Eastern Mediterranean, somewhere between, let's say, the areas between Syria, Lebanon, Cyprus, Turkey, and the Turks. Of course, they have the upper hand now in the case of of the Syrian affairs.
Yeah. Thank you for that, sir. And you're bringing me right into the next matter at hand, Turkey. So just the other day, Trump referred to Turkey's involvement in the overthrow of Assad as an unfriendly takeover, indicating that Ankara now holds significant control over the current situation in Syria. He further said that Turkey had achieved what it's been desiring for thousands of years. Is Turkey executing Erdogan's aspirations of a neo-Ottoman sphere of influence revival with precision, that is, influencing, controlling, dominating the Eastern Mediterranean? And will Erdogan achieve his long-standing objective in Syria, which is to replicate his Libya strategy over oil and gas with Syria, thus pursuing a full EEZ, exclusive economic zone maritime agenda in the Eastern Mediterranean, which boasts some of the largest unexploited yet reserves in the world?
Susie, you have raised a lot of very interesting, frankly speaking, ideas, comments, thoughts, and I will try to answer most of them. First of all, Turkey for years as a neo-Ottoman, country, trying to enlarge its role and, of course, its influence and broader perspectives concerning the security in Mesopotamia, in Syria and Iraq, has increased a lot the involvement and also the influence in the North Syrian affairs. As you very well know, because you are an informed person, the Turks already have done 3 invasions during the last 6 years, since 7 years, which means that they already occupy a number of swaths of land in the area of Afrin, a Kurdish, let's say, area, at least based on population, also in Jarablus or in northern Syria, and the last operation close to the Ras Al Ain. So they have already 3 areas under their control. The second army of Turkey, based in Malatya, has a direct involvement in supporting all those pro-Turkish groups like the Free Syrian Army and some other organizations there. I'm not talking about the HTS. HTS is a jihadist organization with former connections with Al-Nusra and Al-Qaeda, and Al-Sara, the new leader, the new, let's say, tough guy, the new prominent guy in Damascus, has relations with Turkey, but not so close like other groups. But anyway, Erdogan has a special plan, especially dealing with northern Iraq and with Syria. The events now, the recent events, Susie, have definitely offered a certain, let's say, flexibility to the Turkish president to increase its involvement in Syria. Maybe he did not in advance, let's say, think that I would come from Halep and from Homs and Hama to Damascus, because the Assad regime was really in a very bad shape. They did not fight for their country. They were fighting for the last 6-7 years, thanks to the Russians, Air Force, thanks to Hezbollah, the Shia group in Lebanon, and thanks, of course, to the Iranian advisors. But all of them were not present in the last issue. So Erdogan had a lot of increasing capabilities and supported all those guerrillas and all those groups and all those, let's say, asymmetric, let's say, enemies. After that, we see, Susie, that now the director of the special intelligence of Turkey, Ibrahim Kalin, visited the 4th day of the change of command in Damascus, visited the Syrian capital and exchanged views about the Turkish-Syrian cooperation. On the other hand, we have some comments coming from the leader of HTS, who said that Turkey will play the major role in reconstruction of Syria after the terrible 11-13 years of civil war. So the role of Turkey will be prominent. I know very many people here, even in Cyprus or in Greece, do not like and understand that Erdogan's policies. Me too. But on the other hand, I have to accept as an analyst, realistically, that we have to deal with the specific issues of Erdogan's involvement in Syria. He has also some problems. The problems are in the northeastern Syria with the Kurdish community, because, as you know, the Syrian defense forces, predominantly Kurdish and some Arab forces, are against Libya. But I couldn't exclude the option that Erdogan would make a new invasion there, fighting the Kurdish guerrilla movement, although that specific group has cooperating for the last 5-6 years against ISIS and getting support by United States. There are 920 American Marines and special forces close to Euphrates River supporting the Kurds. But with President Trump coming in about 30 days to the White House, we don't know what will be the American policy towards the Kurds. You know, Trump is a very mercurial and difficult personality, and we cannot be sure about his reaction. So the Turkish position now probably is using the same style with Libya. There is an illegal, let's say, memorandum of understanding between the pro-Turkish government in Tripoli, in the western Libya, as you know, regarding exclusive economic zone, based on an agreement of former Libyan Prime Minister Sarraj with Erdogan, and they are planning, the Turks probably to proceed with the same style and with the same approach to Syria. If the Syrian new leaders, I mean, Jolani, proceeds with coming closer to Turkey, such kind of development and such a kind of option would create problems in Eastern Mediterranean, and also they don't calculate let's say, the position of Cyprus, the position of Nicosia regarding maritime rights and exclusive economic rights. Concluding, I would say that we have to pay attention to what's going on in Eastern Mediterranean. There are a lot of small conflicts and small wars, like, you know, the case of Lebanon, the case of Gaza. There are the Israeli operations recently against Hezbollah, and still continuing against Hamas. So even against Houthi in you know, guerrillas in Yemen. So we have a lot of multi-front, I call them multi-front operations in sub-conflicts, let's call them sub-conflicts in that area. So the Turkish position is requiring particular attention. Otherwise, you never know what will be next. But we have to be waiting a little bit to see what will be the American, let's say, reaction and the American options in northeastern Syria, and also to see what kind of agreements will be signed by Erdogan and the new Syrian leadership. And as you can understand, that creates problems and headaches, and to the Russians, who are in a very negative position right now, and to the Iranians, because they cannot anymore support the pro-Assad groups in Syria, they cannot support Hezbollah. So you can understand, Susie, that we have a lot of things to see in the coming weeks, days, months, and whatever else.
Thank you, Dr. Drougos. Following that, I'd like to again ask you on Turkey. Turkey is not just her involvement in Syria and Libya. They've strategically, over the last few years, established a presence everywhere. Albania, Skopje, North Macedonia now, Kosovo,
Yes.
Libya, Azerbaijan, Artsakh, Syria, Cyprus, Sudan, while Greece seems to remain passive. What is Greece doing, if anything, at all?
Well, extremely interesting question. As you just mentioned, in a number of places around the Middle East and Africa, Turks are, you know, having all these megalomaniac policies, and they want to be, they have presence already, for instance, in Somalia, in the Horn of Africa. They are training the Somali army. They are playing, let's say, something between Ethiopia and Somalia in order to increase the level of involvement and engagement with the Horn of Africa. You were right that they get a lot of support from the very rich Emirate of Qatar. There is a Turkish base close to Doha, not far away from the huge American base in Al Udeid in Qatar. Also, they have in Azerbaijan, supporting Azerbaijan against Armenia in the war of Nagorno-Karabakh. They have also some maritime capabilities to make procedures of engaging power in Albania. They are getting some, you know, facilities there for submarines or whatever else in the Adriatic Sea. They have some influence, of course, in North Macedonia, as you said, training military officers, police officers, and so on. So we see what they are going well with the occupation army in Cyprus, the last half century, 50 years. Unfortunately, they have also involvement in some small bases, what they call them lily pads, in Mesopotamia, in Iraq, close to Bakuba. So we see that Erdogan has increased the power projection of Turkey to a number of areas, and that requires further attention, and from Cyprus and from Greece, but also and from certain, active sectors of the Atlantic Alliance. Okay, Turkey is a member of NATO, but Turkey has its own agenda, and proceeding with a lot of different approaches to regional and sub-regional problems and issues and areas. So you asked me about Greece. Well, it's true that it was very pathetic, our reaction to all these areas. We have, of course, Greece has increased a number of military cooperation and, proceeding with naval, let's say, air exercises, drills with France. We have some relations with Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, but Erdogan managed to return and having influence and in Abu Dhabi and in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, with his last year's, visits there. So Turkey is quite close. You see now, even in the, let's say, the various meetings, like last weekend in Aqaba, Jordan, Turkey was there with the foreign minister Hakan Fidan, a very well-known person and very active in the areas, as a former director of MIT. He was very much involved in, in this all underground, hybrid, asymmetric, and other operations. So, and of course, supporting, pro-Turkish groups in the northern part of Syria. So, the Greece, as you probably know, from the first day of next year, 32 days, will be a rotating member for 2 years, let's say, permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. Also will have a role with various, we are not Americans, we are not British or French or Russians or Chinese, but Greece will try, as far as I know from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, will try to play a key role in various, meetings, in also sessions of the United Nations Security Council. And of course, Mr. Gerapetritis and Minister Dendias of Defense, they will try to increase at least the status of Greece in international talks, meetings, sessions, negotiations, and so on. On the other hand, we have made some improvement in increasing our cooperation and with Cyprus and Israel. But frankly speaking, because realistically speaking, as an analyst, I'm not very satisfied. I'm not very satisfied with our policies and our engagements in the area. We have to do more in the military field. We have to increase our cooperation even more with Cyprus and with Israel, despite the recent wars in Gaza and in South Lebanon and so on. We have to keep a vigilant eye on the Turkish developments, because I'm expecting more things to do soon, especially in Syria and even in North Iraq, because in North Iraq, as you know, there are problems in Erbil and Sulaymaniyah with the other Kurdish groups there, and we don't know what role will be played by Ankara. And also, despite the fact that they were rather flexible towards Russia, I think that the recent, decisions of Turkey to support the guerrilla groups and all those active groups in Syria, there are some problems now. We cannot see them with an open eye, but there are some problems between Russia and Turkey, and we have to see that. But also Russia is in a difficult position, and because they have the war in Ukraine, the situations between Russia and NATO are not going well. So Turkey is always a mysterious, a mystic, diplomatic position. We have to keep, as I told you, I repeat that, a vigilant eye, because, the so-called, engagement and involvement and presence and increasing maritime and air activities in Eastern Mediterranean, definitely they give the Turks a prominent position to play in the coming weeks and months. So, it's a delicate issue, and answering I'll say, frankly, to your question, I would say, Susie, that we have to be more engaged and more involved in that area. We have to have more presence in Eastern Mediterranean, not only supporting and covering Cyprus, but also thinking a little bit in broader terms of security, in more wider terms of security, especially with Israel and maybe in some other Arab states. But I see that Erdogan, with a very creative and very clever and very, let's say, different style of, diplomacy, using asymmetric ways, using the army, proceeding with threats and other, legal or illegal, policies. It has increased Turkey its involvement there. The developments in Syria and to a certain extent in other areas in Middle East and Africa, they give the Turks a predominant position, unfortunately, in international and global and regional affairs.
Thank you for your analysis. They've been the steps that Erdogan, the position he's found himself in, he's placed Turkey in. These are steps that they've been taking for the last 2 decades. So I don't know what can be done from now on by the Greek government or the Cyprus government to even come close to countering.
The Cyprus government has proceeded recently, because I was following President Christodoulidis. The meetings went with President Biden. Okay, anyway, President Biden will be passed in let's say, in a month. But also I've seen the strategic dialogue. I thought that very positively between United States and Cyprus. We must not forget that Cyprus, beyond the terrible occupation by the Turks, had not the opportunity to buy weapons from certain countries, let's say, because of an unbelievable and very wrong embargo introduced after the invasion of the Turks. We have to, all this area, what we call new policies of Turkey. We have to see that, and we must not forget, Susie, the fact that they have a very active military intelligence. I know that from NATO quite well, because for years, 30 years almost, working for NATO projects and following and writing a lot about NATO, I can tell you that the Turks, they manage to cover a lot of things. They know how to keep balances. They know how to work with various forces and sub-forces in certain areas. So for that reason, I say that I'm not saying that Greece does not have capabilities. We do have them, but we have to increase our public diplomacy more. We have to increase our military diplomacy and many other arguments, specific things which we can do in order to increase our status, our style, our involvement, our presence, and of course our capabilities in crucial and strategic areas.
The buzz in Cyprus, the last few weeks, even months, is that there's lots of high-level meetings happening behind the closed doors between the big power representatives and the Cyprus government. What's going around in Cyprus is that Cyprus is being upgraded as a control base for the new situation in the region. Your view on the matter? Who are the big players? What are you hearing in the corridors of NATO?
I'll tell you, Cyprus has increased its status. Definitely, it's a strategic position, and of course, its role in a very difficult area, in a very area which we cannot predict many things in Eastern Mediterranean. I'm saying, as you know, there are of course the British bases there as a sovereign basis of United Kingdom. Of course, the Americans are using the British bases, Akrotiri and Dekelia, for intelligence reasons, for supporting as a hub for operations of logistics. Also, they are using the bases the way the Americans and the British and the New Zealanders and Australians and Canadians in the so-called echelon system. They are following the events there because they have a special alliance. It's, especially the Americans with the British, they are quite famous for decades of special relationship. But I see that, as you know, in the past, some months ago also, the bases, the air base, the Royal Air Force was used by British planes in bombing of Yemen, of Houthi guerrillas, and there Hodeida and in Sana'a in Yemen. Also, I am one of the persons, Susi, who supported some years ago how to bring Cyprus closer to NATO. But as you know, NATO requires a decision and a positive response by 32 countries. So because of Turkey veto and because of the policies of Ankara, it's very difficult for Cyprus to join the alliance. I would like to see Cyprus in the alliance because Cyprus is a westernized society. It's a strategic position in Eastern Mediterranean. It could support operations there. And Mr. Christodoulidis, but also in previous, in the past, I mean, presidents, they tried to do more things. But the occupation army, the northern part of Cyprus, all these illegal activities by Ersin Tatar and Erdogan, they don't offer a lot of options. But I've seen that, as you know, NATO has 32 countries, members, but there are another 19 countries with special relations with NATO. Some countries like Australia or Japan or South Korea or Argentina or some other countries from various continents. Susie, I see that with the recent changes in, in diplomacy and the fact that with support from Greece and from France, I'm waiting that Cyprus will come closer, not only as a member of the European Union. Of course, it participates in the policies, in the joint policy of and diplomacy of European Union. I think that with the next year, Kaja Kallas, the Special Commissioner and Vice President of the European Union, the former Estonian Prime Minister, will come to Nicosia, as far as I know. So I think that we will have some positive trends. I've seen also this proposal, the last one, as you know, of Mr. Kombu, the Foreign Minister of Cyprus, together with Greece and with Austria, presenting some thoughts about how to deal, what to do next in Syria, as you know, about people who have, suffered during Assad's regime in human rights, what to do with, training of the army of the new army of Syria, whenever will be that available. There are a lot of good thoughts and constructive thoughts, positive thoughts related to increase the value of Cyprus. Because for me, no, I'm not talking as a Greek. I think that Cyprus has a very key point in a strategic orientation of the West. So, concluding on this, I would say that it's a time, of course, when Turkey is quite lucky because of the current operations in Syria and about the next steps in Damascus, and by the support of Ankara and the army of Turkey to the guerrillas of Syrian guerrillas. But on the other hand, we must not be pessimist. I see that we have to some alternatives, some other thoughts, military, intelligence, political, diplomatic, humanitarian, and we can play, of course, in Greece and Turkey, a more constructive and multilateral role in that area, not only on a bilateral basis, Greece and Cyprus, but we could have in the same, train. We can have also countries like France, like Italy. We have to increase our diplomatic status because I consider that more things remain to be done.
Thank you for that. The sure thing is that there's lots of background activity happening in Cyprus. People can see it, people can feel it. It's a small country anyway, and most of it is background. But a testament to that is the recent visit by British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, which was the first such visit to the country in decades by British Prime Minister. So things are brewing in the background for Cyprus. Let's talk about NATO. Entry of Cyprus is some form of level in NATO under some form. So, and I think very soon we'll be witnesses to some announcements. This is the feeling we're all getting.
Yes. I would even suggest, because I'm working, as I told you, for 3 decades in NATO affairs. I would see, for instance, the participation of the commander of the National Guard of Cyprus in future to be, at the meetings of NATO top-level military officers, for instance, in Naples, in Italy, as you know, which is a joint headquarters of NATO in the southern part. Okay, because Cyprus is member here in this as regionally, connected with this area. It is. part of this area, a small country, but I think that Cyprus and Malta, both countries of the European Union, they offer a lot of opportunities, and in the North Africa and the Middle East. And also, I mean, there are another option is a NATO Parliamentary Assembly. I worked for that assembly in the past and writing papers and so on. And I remember, I'm not very sure if it was 8 or 9 years ago, there were two parliamentarians from different political parties, of course, from Cyprus, engaged with some activities of the annual meetings of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. And in that area, okay, as you know, Turkey has always a hand because they can always block things. But on the other hand, the Americans and the British and others, they have to see what is the NATO orientation and the NATO engagement with that area. Because NATO is a multilateral alliance of 32 members. You never know in future, maybe having more. For the time being, we have 32 members after the accession of Sweden and Finland to the Euro-Atlantic community. I think that Cyprus has an option. We can do more things, something which I mentioned in some meetings here with the ambassador of Cyprus in Athens, and also in some social meetings. I mentioned that there are options. Okay, Cyprus is difficult to be a member in the coming time because of the position of Turkey and this blocking position of Ankara to a Cyprus, let's say, invitation. But there are options in military issues, in intelligence issues, in maritime, exercises, in joint, groups
yes,
regarding asymmetric threats, regarding hybrid threats. So I think there are options, and Cyprus and Greece and other NATO allies, Susie, at the end of the day, they can cooperate to that direction, and at the end of the day, to have positive and prominent and predominant and important, let's say, let's call them, results relating between Cyprus and NATO affairs.
Dr. Drougos, thank you very much for your time and for sharing your analysis and thoughts and views. Hope to be able to host you again.
Thank you very much. Of course, definitely I will be at your disposal. And thank you very much, Susie, for offering me to express some of my options and positions and comments to strategic and regional and sub-regional affairs in our area. Thanks a lot for the kind invitation.
You're more than welcome, sir. Have a good rest of the night.
Thank you.